Some things can survive the catastrophe of time. They show traces of the strong will that changes the world, but they stay in their place, floating quietly on the verge of memory and reality. The ancient dream of sailing, going beyond the horizon until the unknown land, still persists in sailors nowadays. Now equipped with satellite and GPS, the digital representation of the sea and its coasts makes this ancient dream look like a short, smooth, and steady line on the screen. Yet it is still not enough to avoid the risk of confronting chaos. The powerful ocean offers the opportunity of breaking the line of the journey into millions of small fragments. Every time the bow hits a wave and turns the boat away from the dream, the direction has to be corrected, once and again by hand. In an attempt to understand the mechanism of our memory, we decide to rescue the boat from the past, trusting in its qualities as an instrument that contains gestures, traces, images, and unchosen possibilities. Then, like a prehistoric creature that has been brought back to life, the boat smoothly rocks again in the harbor, attached to the pontoon with the resignation of a camel waiting to cross the desert. Slowly, we chance every single gesture to be able to dwell into the chaos of the boat, where none of us seem to suspect the darkness of a stormy night at sea. The engine sounds good, and the new propeller, bigger than the original one, is shining underneath the surface of the water. The floating microcosmos start functioning again.
Thanks. I think I saw something over there.
From the very beginning, I assumed the role of the cook, perhaps because I enjoyed the simple smells coming out of the grill, which blended with the warm air of the night. I am reminded of family gatherings long ago. The same way I would treat my father, I saved the thickest slice for the captain when I turned the singed meat on the grill. Sitting on the aft deck, I lit the bag of charcoal. We drank beer and ate roasted tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, sausages, and meat in thick slices. I thought Lukas was a vegetarian. Later on, I realized that he wasn't, and I wondered why he tried to place himself in the situation of being forced to eat meat. Lukas sat next to me on the deck, and I was aware that we began to create a space of synchrony and reciprocity, which excluded the captain, and he simultaneously constructed his place of authority and loneliness. Lukas carefully set the plates, glasses, and cutlery on the plastic tablecloth that laid flat against the wooden deck. He did it with such care that when the night covered the tired and irredeemably messy boat, it felt almost glamorous. But then he, as well as the captain, would drown their meat with ketchup, like kids. Taking advantage of the dead calm, we hoisted sails with the boat attached to the pontoon, and for the first time, discovered the elegant silhouette of the boat and its real dimensions. All the sails together were much bigger than I imagined, and looked old and stained, but when a gentle wind began to blow, they swelled, and the boat heeled over and began to pull the ropes dangerously. We took them down as quickly as we could, folding the sails with the precision that some might call care. Seeing the boat with hoisted sails and pulling out strongly from the harbor left us with a rush and the necessity to be off to the sea. At night, from the tranquility of the port, we could see fireworks and hear the clamor of people on the streets. It was a carnival, and like huge knots of worms writhing in quicksand, crowds of people ate and drank on the beach with great abandon. However, the city seemed completely detached from our reality, and I understood there was no turning back. I was already prey to the force that drives men to the sea, the jungle, the poles, or other planets. I thought it right to drink the night's first whiskey, so I went down to the cabin and poured 3 glasses from the bottle I had just bought that afternoon.
Do you see it?
I do. I think I saw something between here and the boat.
What is it? A tortoise?
Of all that was surrounding me in that moment, I just remember the 3 of us being tucked away into the small space of the boat. I recall Federico slowly but surely climbing out of the dark into the light of the cockpit, continuously talking, expansively and open. In his hands, he held a bottle of whiskey that he wanted to share. The captain was prowling around the cockpit, busily scraping off blobs of paint with a knife. In an amused way, he let out a word that had got stuck on repeat, once in a while looking up, and he suddenly seemed much younger. Somehow, I ended up with a flare gun in my hand. Federico poured some whiskey in my glass, and when I looked down, there were 2 cartridges for the flare gun next to the glass. The captain stuffed in 2 bullets while I stared at this thing in my hands. The barrels seemed self-made. The whole gun was a bit bulky, and I didn't really know how to hold it. I felt timid and cowed in the situation. I knew that I could hesitate to fire the gun, but eventually it would have to be me pulling the trigger. I started to enjoy the moment of being spurred on by the others, and finally, I allowed myself to ease up and let go. My eyes were closed and my body was busy absorbing the blowback when the second explosion happened. I don't remember if I saw the flare.
Hand me the rope.
Rounded waves allowed the boat to advance smoothly, driven only by the motor. However, the order for hoisting sails didn't come. It seemed as if the noise and vibration of the engine was the last remaining tie we had with the land. A big mouth, formed by 2 cargo ships anchored in the harbor entrance, finally spit us out. The offshore wind and the fluid, curved horizon reduced the boat into something very tiny. Our plan was to set sails 45 degrees northeast for one day. The captain just nodded, and Lukas asked if those were the big waves on the Atlantic. I answered by asking him to be patient. Then the sails went as high as possible. The wind grew stronger. The boat heeled over to the east. The waves rose. The figurehead began its fight with the sea, and Lukas' eyes ceased shining. After a few minutes, all 3 sails were tight and well formed. The boat was beautiful, and a hole I noticed in the lower section of the mainsail seemed small in comparison to the large dimensions of the canvas. The boat felt light as it rode waves that every second got higher and more regular at a speed of 6 knots per hour. The volcanic and gray silhouette of Gran Canaria was diluted in the south of the haze from the Sahara. Lukas and the captain were vomiting downwind, and the water that ran from the bow along the corridor then cleaned the boat.
Get in some water.
My name is Huey Warner.
John Ingram. My wife Ray.
There was a storm about 4 days ago. I'm the only survivor. There were 3 of us. We went from Gran Canaria to Helsinki. And then the sail cracked and we couldn't maneuver it.
Get some rest.
Okay.
I enjoyed the boat's heavy dance, sitting next to the captain. The gash in the mainsail was already much bigger and continued yielding gradually. The boat started to lose speed because of it, and all sails started to shake heavily. I waited until the strong wind and the enormous weight of the concrete boat fought their battle, and the mainsail flew furiously into the dark sky. The ship began to hesitate, and with only power from 2 small sails, it was moving too slowly. As we lost course, 4-meter-high waves coming from windward began to smash violently against the boat. The captain and I hurried to the deck to roll up the sail on the boom. Looking at the crude structure of the ship, I realized our clumsiness. I heard the engine and realized the only sounds came from our boat, and everything else was quiet, and I wanted to be a part of that silence. And I saw the fear in the captain's face behind the steering wheel. I returned to the cockpit and stepped down into the cabin. Lukas asked from his bed what happened. I told him that we just lost the mainsail. I felt sorry for him, and I missed his strong and young presence. I took a big swig of whiskey and returned upstairs. I saw how the boat rose and fell down again and again on a horizon free from any reference points. There were no stars. We turned our course to Lanzarote, which we only saw on the GPS screen. From my bunk, I could see a bit of night sky through the open cabin door. I remember the darkness being so dense that the effort it took me to figure out what was the sky and what were the feet of the others made me throw up again. The boat was still rocking heavily, and I felt guilty for laying useless in my bed, but I knew that the worst was already over. While I was laying there, the others were still running around the boat, rushing through the cabin and screaming things I couldn't understand due to the storm outside. I tried to get a hold of one of them, but he was too frantic to stop and respond. I lifted myself up in an upright position and grabbed Federico's arm when he was passing me. Tersely, he said that 2 of the 3 sails had broken and they were trying to stabilize the boat. I tried to fix my gaze at a point at the ceiling to avoid throwing up again. I was blaming my physical condition for making me a spectator of the situation, but settled quite easily with my powerlessness. Since I wasn't able to take care of myself, I had to trust them, and I tried to escape into sleep.
So, how do you feel?
Better. For how long have I been sleeping?
Oh, for quite a while now.
You must be starving. We got food down in the cabin. Help yourself to it.
Come on. I'll show you.
It took me a while to get myself together to leave my bunk. While I then stood there in the cockpit, the feeling of dizziness was back within a moment and my forehead broke into a cold sweat. The 2 others sat there and didn't pay much attention to my humble presence. I tried to swallow the comeback of the bitter taste in my mouth as they simultaneously told me that they'd been seeing dolphins swimming with the boat. The captain looked at Federico as he added that they had been rather small and that they were diving underneath the boat from one side to another. Even though I liked dolphins, I couldn't express my emotional response to their story. I stood there in my clammy oilskin, feeling nauseous and numb, and I saw myself from the outside, as a third person amongst the 2 others. I thought I tried to explain to them this apathetic feeling that shut myself off from their dolphin story and distorted my self-perception, but I think I didn't say a word. Later I was sitting, half laying on the wooden bench of the cockpit, with the captain sitting on the other side in a similar posture. Although he was looking as sick as I felt, I thought that he was looking more noble in our shared posture. His glasses were streaky from the salt water, while his view went through the misted window of the cockpit. He closed his eyes in intervals.
Guys, we gotta speed it up. Turn.
Exhausted, we moored the boat to the pontoon amongst big and luxury yachts. As promised earlier to one another, we didn't shave during the duration of the trip, and then suddenly, being thrown into the scenery of the brand new traditional architecture of the port made me feel odd. Time stood still in the boat. Once back inside, we returned to the normal state of chaos, and everything was almost burning underneath the sun. In search of shade, I gradually diverged from the false reality of the harbor and the boat. From there, I understood that I was not prepared to offer my body in a fight with no benefits. Sitting at the end of the breakwater, I decided to take advantage of the night and the rest of the whiskey I had to announce to Lukas my decision of giving up the crossing. I was kneeling on the pontoon, scrubbing my hands in the water to wash off the tuna smell, when the captain came rowing towards me in an almost flat lifeboat. I don't know if I already thought of the situation as significant, or if this particular moment just got stuck in my mind afterwards. A discussion we had in a bar on the first night after our forced stop might have been not final, but as indicatory for where our cruise would take us. That night, the three of us were sitting at a table for four, remaining silent on what happened during the last days in sea. By and by, Federico and I were starting to bring up the need for a functioning lifeboat, an inspected life raft, and all the other things we were lacking. It appeared as if all three of us reached a moment of understanding, and I didn't feel that stupid anymore to ask for a test cruise before we would try to cross the ocean again. I thought I sensed fatherly feelings in the captain. Only retrospectively, I noticed that the captain, even in his agreement, didn't speak out a single clear pledge. Together we lifted the sad-looking lifeboat on the pontoon. The bottom of it was completely covered with seashells, and the sides were green from the seagrass. Federico came, and the three of us started to scrub the lifeboat frenziedly. I don't remember where my sudden motivation came from. We got the boat clean, and from a distance, Federico and I watched it drying in the midday sun. I saw the captain tearing apart the lifeboat's rubber layers, scraping off the old glue and seams with his knife. Eventually, I was sitting by myself on the aft deck's bench. The captain was gone, and so was Federico, but I couldn't care less in that moment where they were. In my resignation, I couldn't come up with any better place to be, but I felt pushed to leave this spot. I was afraid that one of them would come back and would try to pull me into a conversation about how each one of them felt right now and why things came as they did. The frustration that we weren't able to get it together was making me mad. I couldn't accept that compromises would get us nowhere and that the boat was too small to fit our three egos.